So you're thinking about taking your business global. I mean, it's the dream, right? The ultimate growth plan. But here's the thing. Success isn't just about finding new customers. It's about learning to play on a whole new game board, a global one. Today, we're going to put together a playbook, a guide for getting through the tricky political and legal stuff that can seriously trip you up.
It's a really exciting thought, isn't it? Planting your flag in a brand new market. But hold on. Before you even think about booking that flight, your success really comes down to one thing. You got to understand the terrain. See, every single country has its own unwritten rules, its own hidden traps, and yeah, its own amazing opportunities. So let's dive into what those challenges really are.
There's probably no better example of this high-stakes game than China. For decades, the promise was just irresistible. I mean, a market with over 1 billion people, huge resources, a killer strategic position. You can see the appeal. But that promise always came with a hefty dose of peril. We're talking about a ridiculously complex bureaucracy, deep-rooted corruption, and a legal system that, well, it can feel like trying to hit a moving target. And that's really the heart of global business, isn't it? Constantly trying to balance that incredible promise with that very real peril.
All right, let's get into the first chapter of our playbook. Look, before you even start thinking about marketing or supply chains, you have to get a handle on the political rules of the game. This is the big one. It's non-negotiable because honestly, it dictates everything.
So what are we even talking about here? We're talking about a country's political system. Think of it like the entire architecture of power. The institutions, the organizations, all the rules, both written and unwritten. And for a business like yours, this system is huge. It decides how you operate, how much freedom you actually have, and, maybe most importantly, whether the government is going to be your partner, a referee, or your opponent.
Okay, let's break this down into two big buckets, the two ends of the spectrum. First, you've got democracy. Here, the government is kind of like a referee in a sports game. They set the rules for fair play, but they stay on the sidelines. Your relationship with them can even be a bit adversarial, right? You might sue the government, they might fine you. But then, you have totalitarianism. And here the government is not the ref, oh no. They are a star player, right there on the field with you. They might be a key partner, or they might be your biggest competitor. And sure, the relationship can be super cooperative, but you have to remember, it's always on their terms.
And this naturally leads us to the one thing that probably keeps global CEOs up at night: political risk. If the political system is the game board, then political risk, well, that's all the unexpected moves, the hidden traps, the things that can flip the entire game on its head in a split second.
So what is it really? Political risk is that shadow of uncertainty. It's all the what-ifs. What if a new government gets elected? What if they pass a new law that targets your industry? What if public opinion just sours on foreign companies? It's the chance, the very real chance, that the political climate shifts and suddenly, poof, there go your profits, or maybe even the entire value of your investment. So how do you even begin to manage this? Well, a good way to think about it is like a threat meter. There are basically 4 levels of political risk, and they escalate in danger. And if you want to be prepared, you've got to understand each one.
Okay, level 1 is what we call systemic risk. This is the most general kind. It's when something changes for everyone. Think of a country suddenly changing its corporate tax policy or rolling out strict new data privacy laws. It affects every single company operating there. So while it changes the landscape, at least it's not singling you out.
All right, moving up the threat meter to level 2, procedural risk. Now this one's less about big new laws and more about the day-to-day grind, all the friction that makes it hard to get stuff done. We're talking about those hidden costs, having to deal with corrupt officials, drowning in red tape, or facing a court system that feels totally unpredictable. This kind of risk probably won't shut you down overnight, but man, it can slowly drain your money, your time, and your sanity.
Okay, now at level 3, things start to get personal. This is distributive risk. Here's the scenario. A government sees you're doing really well, making a lot of money, and decides, you know what, we want a bigger piece of that pie. So maybe they slap a new windfall tax just on your industry, or they change the rules on foreign ownership. The key thing is, they're changing the deal after you've already put your money in. It's a targeted move, plain and simple, to take some of your profits.
And that brings us to the top of the meter. Level 4, catastrophic risk. This is the absolute worst-case scenario. We're talking about massive, random events that are completely out of your control. Things like civil war, an insurrection, a major international conflict, stuff that doesn't just disrupt your operations, it paralyzes them. It's unpredictable, it's devastating, and it can literally wipe out your entire investment overnight.
So there you have it. That's the political playbook. Now let's switch gears and look at the official rulebook, the legal system. This is the framework that spells out everything from how you enforce the contract to how you protect your property. And believe me, it is every bit as important as the political climate.
Basically, you can think of the world as running on two major legal operating systems. On one hand, you have common law. This is what you see in places like the US and the UK. It's built on tradition and what's come before, precedent. The judge's job is to interpret the law, which gives them a lot of flexibility. On the other hand, you've got civil law, which is big in Europe and Asia. This system is all about super detailed written legal codes. The judge's job isn't to interpret, it's to strictly apply the code as it's written. So here's the bottom line. One system gives you flexibility, the other gives you predictability.
Of course, it's not always that simple. You'll also run into other systems. There's theocratic law, which is based on religious principles. There's customary law, which comes from the way things have been done in a community for a long time. And then you have tons of mixed systems that are a blend of two or more of these. The takeaway? You gotta know what you're walking into because each one demands a totally different strategy.
Okay, let's really zero in on what might be the single most important legal battlefield in today's economy: protecting your big idea. I mean, we live in a world driven by innovation, and this is where fortunes are made and lost.
So what are we actually protecting here? It's something called intellectual property rights, or IPRs. These are basically the ownership papers for your company's intangible stuff. You know, the copyright for your software, the patent on your cool new invention, the trademark that is your brand. For so many companies today, this isn't just part of the value of the business, it is the value of the business.
And this quote really just hits the nail on the head. Think about it for a second. It could take your team 5 years and $100 million to create a groundbreaking piece of tech, but for someone else to copy it, that could happen in an instant and cost them practically nothing. That's the problem.
And look, this is not just some academic theory. Take a look at these software piracy numbers. Now, I know they're from 2004, but they paint a really vivid picture of how different this issue is from country to country. Back then, in Vietnam, an unbelievable 92% of software was pirated. 92%! In Russia, 87%. Now compare that to 22% in the US, and you can bet the problem has only gotten more complicated with how fast the internet is today.
So what gives? Why such a massive difference? Well, a huge part of it comes down to culture. In places with a really individualistic culture like the United States, the whole idea of owning an idea just feels right. It feels like a basic right. But in more collectivist cultures, there's often this deep-seated belief in shared ownership. The thinking is that great ideas should be for the good of the whole community, not just locked up by one person or one company. And that fundamental difference in how people see the world completely changes how, or even if, these IPR laws are enforced.
And all of this really leaves us with a huge final question, doesn't it? In this digital world we live in, a world with no borders, where an idea can be copied and sent around the globe with a single click, what does ownership even mean anymore? Figuring that out is probably the biggest challenge and maybe the biggest opportunity for any business that's brave enough to step onto the global stage.